Hi, welcome back. Glad you decided to join me for a second episode. Um, in the first episode, I talked about basically 5 concepts that were really important overall to fatherhood and co-parenting. And in these subsequent episodes, I'm going to break them down in a little bit more detail. But while I've got you, let me ask you please, right now, click the subscribe button. I would be immensely grateful for that. So the 5 pillars, if you will, were your responsibility as a father, putting your child first, being non-judgmental with your co-parent. It's going to be a huge thing we'll talk about in great detail. Not getting lost in anger for not only your child's benefit, but for your own benefit, and the legal ramifications of all of that stuff. So we'll start with number 1, which is being present. One of the reasons why I use the hashtag be present on so much of the stuff that I've been putting out is because it's probably the single most important thing you could do. If you don't do any of the other things right, being present for your child is one of the most important things you can do. It's the way you create a bond. It's the way you create an atmosphere of trust with your child so that they'll be open and honest with you. And then further down the line, when there's more of an opportunity that they might not want to be so open and honest with you, you'll be able to read the signs and know if there's something bothering them, something that you need to get into a little deeper with them as they become young teens and teenagers. You only build that bond by spending time with them. It has nothing to do with money. It has nothing to do with gifts. It has nothing to do with making them into big adventures. One of the things, my son and I love to travel a lot. His mom doesn't like to travel so much. It's okay. It doesn't matter. None of those things are more important than the other. I know that he loves the time he spends with her as much as he loves the time he spends with me. And it doesn't really matter what you're doing. So from a fatherhood point of view, you want to invest the time. That's the most important thing. From a co-parenting point of view, you don't want to make it a competitive situation. It doesn't need to be a game of one-upsmanship. You guys went to a park. Well, we're going to a ball game. Oh, you went to a ball game. We're going to California. Oh, you went to California. We're going to France. It's like, you really don't want to get into that kind of thing. It's just not going to be useful in any way, shape, or form from either point of view, either as a father or from a co-parenting point of view. There are so many things you can do with your child that have, nothing to do with money, has nothing to do with anything fancy. Play a board game. Play sports if your kid loves sports. My son loves football. I coached his football team for a while. Be an active participant in that. Go to games, go to practices, spend that time, watch them, let them show you a way for you to be proud of them. It's one of the things they want to do. Kids don't see things in a material way, the way we get used to, until we train them about that. And it's a lot like race. Kids are basically colorblind until they start to take their cues from adults, from parents, and from other adults in their lives. It's the same thing with time. Any time you spend with your child is going to be quality time as long as you engage them. What you don't want to do, and I've seen and heard about this before, you don't want it to be your turn with the kids. So it's like, whatever. They go in their rooms, they sit on, computers or gaming consoles, or sit there staring at TV. That's not engaged time. You need to be engaged with your child. You need to be engaged in their education, in every aspect of what they're doing. That's the way you build the bond that you're hoping to build and that you need to build. That bond is going to be what carries you forward into the future. And if you don't invest the time early on, that's going to be a more and more difficult thing to achieve. Making up for that time is going to be difficult. It can be done, but it's going to be difficult. So you really want to be there from the beginning, be present from the beginning, be engaged from the beginning, and be involved from the beginning. For me, a childhood memory, one of my fondest childhood memories, was working with my dad. So basically, I was a free helper, but it was awesome. It's some of my fondest memories. It's where we spent the most time talking, the most time engaged, and not only was it huge in terms of the bond that I had with my dad, but I also learned a lot of things because my dad was a craftsman, and no better way to learn than by doing. So all of those kinds of things. My son loves to do chores with me. He'll be happy just to go to the store and help me carry the groceries up the stairs. So you can involve them in just about anything, but the key is to be involved. And that doesn't cost you anything but your time. And let's face it, if you're not willing to invest your time, then you can just turn this off now, because everything I'm going to be talking about is going to have to do with time, which will actually take me down to one of my next points on this matter. Is it's going to be really, really important for you to determine a schedule of co-parenting. Having a good schedule is going to set you up for success, because you'll know when you need to be very concerned about being a dad, and obviously you always need to be concerned, but as far as the time that you're going to be investing, you'll know when that time's going to be, and you'll know when that time is not going to be required. And that's important, because that'll help you set up your life around those kinds of things. So planning is going to become an issue. If you're having a kid and you're not a good planner, I suggest you buy a calendar and start using it, whether you use an electronic one or some people like to write to commit things to memory. You're going to have to start planning. Scheduling will be a huge asset for you. It's going to be one of your biggest tools to do all of the things that you need to do successfully. One of the other things that I want to talk about in the first concept of responsibility also is financial responsibility. And this is something that a lot of guys struggle with, and I'm going to talk more about it when we also talk about the legal stuff. But let me be clear. You always have a financial responsibility. It's that simple. Dudes, you may not like it. Nobody likes reaching into their pocket. Nobody likes really the perception of giving money to the person that they no longer want to be with, but that's not really what's happening. You're not giving your co-parent money for them. You're giving them money for your child. Now, obviously, you have a right to be sure that that's used in a correct way, and we'll talk way more about that when we talk about legal things. But if you're sitting here and you're not paying your fair share, you're doing your child a big disservice, and you're doing yourself a huge disservice. One of the best ways for you to be a good co-parent is to be on an equal footing. So one of the key things I talked about, one of the pillars, is to be non-judgmental. We'll get into that in another episode. But the way you get on that equal footing is to share your equal responsibility. There should never be a situation where mom does all of one thing and you do all of another thing, unless that's the way you guys work it out and it's comfortable for you. But that shouldn't happen just because you decided you don't have a responsibility to do this, or you shouldn't pay this, or anything like that. It's one of the reasons I'm a huge advocate of using the available legal channels to determine what child support should be and what the terms of all of that are, because they'll basically be done by a more independent, unbiased third party. But you don't want to give up the ability to be on the same footing. Whether you get along really, really well with your co-parent or you don't. Either way, you don't want to give that up. In my case, I get along great with my co-parent, so I want to be able to just have a very easy conversation about, oh yeah, well, we need to do this, and this is going to cost X, and that's that. And if you don't get along particularly well and are just at least working towards being amiable, the last thing in the world you want to be able to do is give your co-parent something to knock you with. And one of the first things guys get knocked with is not paying their fair share. So, it doesn't really matter how much money you make, whether you're very, very wealthy or not so wealthy, none of that really matters. Whatever you have, you can apportion some of that to the care and feeding of your child. If you can afford to see this, you can afford to contribute a few dollars to your child's upbringing via their co-parent. And to be completely fair, that could work both ways. There might be a situation where the financial responsibility is much more lopsided on mom because of different jobs and that kind of stuff, and that's fine. I'm certainly not looking to propagate any stereotypes, but I approach this entire show based on my experiences and the things that I've seen around me. And, there's a reason why guys get this kind of knock. Just don't feed into it. Don't do it. It's that simple. It's a benefit for yourself and a benefit for your child. The last thing I want to talk about circles back to presence and responsibility for time. If you want to raise a good kid, and I can't imagine who begins down that road and doesn't want that. If you don't spend time and show your child a loving and caring relationship, how can you expect them to be any kind of empathetic or caring person? If you isolate them and ignore them, they're going to be more isolated and ignored. Humans, by and large, give what they get. You meet someone on the street and they're like, yeah, how you doing? You're an idiot. Chances are you're not going to respond too well to that. If you meet someone on the street and they're like, hey, how you doing? Nice to meet you. Your first inclination is to at least return a smile. With your kids, it's no different. If you don't spend the time with them, engage with them, and show them that kind of behavior, they're not going to take those cues and they're not going to learn them. We're their role models. Both you and your co-parent. The things that you guys both do is going to have a huge bearing on how your children develop socially. Obviously, there can be external factors, and everybody has seen the stories, kids that were raised in great environments and went bad, and kids that were raised in horrible environments that rose above it and came out amazingly. But the vast middle is still basically, you were shown love, so you know how to give love and how to be loved. If you're shown isolation and disregard, chances are that's how you're going to interact with the world around you. So spend time with your kids. In the beginning, gosh, for me, speaking very personally, I love my son to death and spend all kinds of time with him now, but infants are hard. I think they're particularly hard for dads because you don't carry the baby, you're definitely not breastfeeding, whether or not your co-parent does or not. So it takes a little longer to get that bond. And, in the beginning, babies are, they require a lot and give very, very little. But once that personality starts to develop and you get the emotional feedback from them, it's not going to be like any other relationship you've ever had in your life. So it is incredibly worth it to spend the time and invest your time in your child's life, because as cliche as it sounds, when your child genuinely looks up at you one day and says, "I love you, Daddy," you are going to feel that, because it's pretty amazing. So be present, spend the time, doesn't cost any money, can be simple things. Just be there, talk to them, spend the time, engage them. That's it for episode 2. As always, I appreciate your comments, questions. Submit them to me. Please follow my Instagram at BGMix. Follow me on Facebook, Bob Giamarco. And I look forward to seeing you, and subscribe. I almost forgot to ask you to subscribe again. Please subscribe, and see you soon for episode 3.